Brandon Staley, the head coach of the Chargers, is right up there next to you. He wants to run the drill.
That was pretty cool. He's just giving me like little tips or anything like that, you know. But I was just going out there. I was just moving around.
Want to watch football without the restrictions of blackouts or cable? Check out expressvpn.com to help you get access to all the live games. Sign up today using the link in the description to get 3 free months. Kia ora, brothers. It's the Director. Chargers fans. Oh, can you guys imagine with me for just a second what the secondary would look like with J.C. Jackson, Derwin James, Asante Samuel Jr., and Derek Stingley? Holy Tim Tebow loving guacamole. That would be absolutely absurd. And I know. We see stuff like we saw at the top of this video. We overreact. We get hyped up potential. But you know what? In my opinion, this theory holds water. It's possible. It is possible that Derek Stingley might be the guy joining the Los Angeles Chargers in 2022. But the question I do keep asking myself is this the right move? Because let's be honest with ourselves, guys. He's not going to be available at pick number 17. More than likely not, right? If we want to get Derek Stingley on this roster, we more than likely do have to move up. Or do we? I think we do. But I do think it's also a question of how far do we have to move up? How much do we have to give up? And is this really the move that the Chargers want to be making while in this pursuit of a strong postseason, dare I say it, a Super Bowl? So today, we're going to look at the kind of impact that a guy like Derek Stingley would bring to the Chargers, as well as, you know, what we'd have to give up in order to go get him, okay? Maybe we'll even answer if this is the right move. Before we do get started, guys, question in the comments. Outside of Derek Stingley, who would you be willing to trade up for in order to acquire? So you're going to have to give up some draft capital, maybe even a player to go get a guy outside of Derek Stingley. Who would it be? Well, before we do get started, guys, hit us up with a like and sub. If you do enjoy this Chargers content, the small amount of time you guys take to hit the like, sub, and bell notification helps me out a lot. Let's get into it, baby. Lights, camera, action. Are the Chargers gunning for Derek Stingley Jr. to be the selection in the 2022 NFL Draft? Okay, guys, we're going to dissect this, okay, to a molecular level. We're going to take a look and see if this might be the right move for the Chargers and if this is something that could realistically maybe even happen. So let's start off with how the Chargers roster is looking right now in terms of defensive back, all right? I think the Chargers DB room is pretty stacked as it is. Derwin James, the new J.C. Jackson acquisitions, Asante Samuel, Nasir Adderley, Michael Davis. It looks pretty good out there, man. In terms of matching up with, you know, wide receiver talent in general in the NFL, more particular in the AFC West, I think we are armed to the teeth in order to go out and defend against it, right? And the addition of J.C. Jackson this offseason cannot be understated, man. This is a huge boost for this team. We've talked plenty about why J.C. Jackson was a great pickup. We've talked plenty about, you know, how big of an impact he's going to be in Brandon Staley's scheme and in his system. And we're currently in a really good spot. I feel like, you know, at cornerback, there definitely is room to grow a little bit. But at the same time, I'm feeling pretty good about that position, right? So if we decide to go out there and draft a different position outside of cornerback with our first round pick at, let's say, pick number 17, I'm pretty okay with that, right? I will say, though, the one thing that I am a little concerned about when it does come to the corners, maybe even DB in general, is the depth, okay? We need depth majorly, and that's something that I covered in, you know, some of the remaining moves the Chargers can make with the remaining cap space, as well as maybe mid to late round picks in the draft in a previous video, okay? But in a season where we're going to be facing, you know, Devontae Adams twice a year, DK Metcalf, Cooper Kupp, Tyreek Hill, A.J. Brown, Deebo Samuel, DeAndre Hopkins, Jerry Jeudy, George Kittle, Darren Waller, Amari Cooper, Kyle Pitts, and even more, it's probably not a bad idea to go load up on DB while you can, okay? So let's start off with why more corners is actually an alpha idea, okay? I know we look pretty set right now, but just imagining Derek Stingley on this roster, hell, just another really good corner, this could be an alpha idea, okay? And the biggest thing that came to my mind when entertaining the idea of bringing Derek Stingley to this roster was our pass rush, right? Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, that is one of the meanest in the NFL. And we know that Brandon Staley wants more corners. He lives in a DB, 5 DB scheme 65% of the time, I think is what he was saying in one of the articles. I think this is going to pair very well with what the Chargers got going on at pass rush right now, right? He threw down for Khalil Mack. He knew the guy. He knows the kind of value he's going to bring to this team, to this system. And it goes hand in hand with why he picked up, J.C. Jackson, to a very aggressive pickup by this team. The pressure that we're about to produce with Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa is on another level, and it was a big investment. We talk a lot about how money talks, right? But what would make that duo even more lethal is man corners. And this is something that I've been alluding to since the Chargers were connected to various cornerbacks in free agency. I think Travarius Ward, of course, J.C. Jackson, Stephon Gilmore. These guys had a lot of things in common, right? And that was they predominantly perform very, very well in a man-heavy scheme. And you even take a look at the Chargers roster right now, Asante Samuel Jr., he's solid, right? He's solid all around. But I remember when we were looking at him as far as a potential Charger pickup in the draft last year, he was projected to play at his best in a man-heavy scheme, right? J.C. Jackson, incredible in all aspects, best in a man-heavy scheme. Derwin James, hybrid safety, great in a man-heavy scheme. And then, of course, Michael Davis, who I do think is slightly better in man coverage than zone coverage. This team seems to be revolving around adding a little bit more man to the system this year. And, of course, defenses change every year. But this is kind of showing signs of a big shift, isn't it? And you know what? I see what you're doing, Brandon Staley, right? We're about to unleash the beast. I see it. We're just kind of following breadcrumbs here. The beast equals the man blitz. And that's something I know Brandon Staley loves to use. I know it's something that we wish we could use a little bit more. Just adding JC and Khalil Mack to this roster this year is going to open up a lot more opportunity to do that. Right? And the reason why this works, and this is something that you want to, grow into as far as a team, get more man, talented corners out there, get a better pass rush. To put it simply, a stupid good pass rush like Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack equals less time to throw for your quarterback, right? I think that's pretty simple. And then stupid good coverage on top of that means a longer time for targets to get open, therefore a bigger moment or a longer period of time for your pass rushers to get to the quarterback, okay? And what this equates to is sacks, fumbles, interceptions. It's the long con to boost our turnover ratio. That's actually what I'm kind of seeing this whole thing as. We saw Brandon Staley at LSU. We see him really looking at a lot of corners out there in free agency and now in the draft. It feels like this is kind of the move that he wants to do, the long con to help our turnover ratio. And this is a very aggressive style of defense. It's one that, if done correctly is very lethal, but it's hard to pull off. But it's got Brandon Staley written all over it, man. And I think that, again, this is kind of starting to point more evidence towards the Chargers maybe wanting a corner in the draft. We talked a lot about them being, connected to Stephon Gilmore as well with J.C. Jackson this offseason. I think the Chargers might still be in the market for one more corner, and I do think it could come via the draft, okay? So why Derek Stingley? Why is Derek Stingley the guy to really complete this puzzle? What does he bring as a player? Well, Stingley, in my opinion, possesses the ability to defend bigger receivers at a high level. Okay, the Chargers right now, their corners are pretty dang good. Asante Samuel, I think, is going to grow into one of the better corners in the NFL. J.C. Jackson, one of the best corners in the NFL as it is. But the Chargers do lack a little bit of diversity when it comes to size outside of Michael Davis. And Michael Davis, he's been pretty good, 6'2", decently fast, but we've seen, especially from last season, him get burned a little bit. And I think that's what Derek Stingley, just on the surface could bring, is that stature and that athleticism, of course, with the coverage skills as well. He's just over 6 feet tall. His athleticism, his arm length, these prove very effective versus guys like, DK Metcalf, right? Taller guys, physical guys. Derek Stingley is the archetype of cornerback that you want to put up against him. And like you guys remember from some of the receivers that we're going to be playing this season, Deebo Samuel, not Cooper, he's a little bit too short. Even you guys get what I'm saying. He's going to be very good in addition to the other corners that we have, but he matches up a little bit better with those more physical, taller wide receivers in the NFL. And that's just on the surface of what he brings, okay? Stingley is exactly the kind of guy that you want on your team if you want interceptions, and that's what gets me the most excited. He intercepts the ball at an elite NFL level due to his tracking, patience, and instincts, right? It's really tough to play this position in the NFL. That's why it's so highly coveted in the draft, in free agency, because this instinct, this ability is not a copy and paste sort of thing with every single corner in the league. It's tough to find guys like this. You know, these ball skills are going to, serve him very well at the next level here in the NFL. And he does it, I would say, just as good as any other cornerback in the NFL right now. And in terms of cover, so he's going to bring the interceptions, right? If you're going to be throwing a lot of pressure with Bosa and Mack, you want guys like J.C. Jackson, Asante Samuel, and then in addition, Derek Stingley Jr., that's absolutely ridiculous. But in terms of coverage, he's also equally as ridiculous, which again buys more time for your pass rushers to get to the quarterback. There are very few corners that I trust in this year's draft to shadow the league's best wide receivers. I like Sauce. I think Booth has potential, maybe as a cornerback too. But man, Derek Stingley, dude, he can do it, right? He plays with great patience, anticipation, in zone, but especially in man. His route anticipation, his football IQ, these are all insane. He just knows, or he just has all the intelligence and instincts to match up against, again, some of the better wide receivers in the league today. And he's been compared to Stephon Gilmore a lot. When I'm going through my draft research, I'm taking a look, and people are saying this guy looks a heck of a lot like Stephon Gilmore. I definitely agree with that, but I would say he's a little bit faster. And we already know that his play style, or at least what he brings in terms of a cornerback, pairs up very well with a guy like J.C. Jackson, of course, who was the teammate of Stephon Gilmore in his dominancy with the New England Patriots. So I love it, man. I really feel like, Derek Stingley, I do love Sauce. I do love Booth. I even love guys like McDuffie and Gordon, but Stingley he just fits what this team is trying to do right now, at least from what I'm taking a look at today. So the next thing I do want to talk about is the third corner is the final Infinity Stone. All right, so with our cornerbacks right now, again, JC, Asante, even Michael Davis, this idea of more man blitzes, more man coverage in general, it's something that could already work out. As of today, I think we're going to see a lot more of that. But the tipping point here that really takes this plan to the next level is another shutdown corner. Stingley would start as our opposite corner of J.C. Jackson. That's already scary to think about. We know Brandon Staley wants Asante on the inside as our slot cornerback. That's a stupid talented group of corners to have on the field at once. You add Derwin James to the mix, it's game over, right? And there's no team in the NFL that boasts enough star, wide receiver power to contend with this kind of DB group. Staley's assignments, Stingley, Derek Stingley's assignments are likely to shut down the team's number 2 wide receiver if he was with the Chargers. So he would be assigned to their number 2 wide receiver. And that's a huge edge for Derek Stingley if he were to be drafted by the Los Angeles Chargers, right? You got yourself J.C. Jackson on the number 1 guy shadowing him. Then you take out Derek Stingley to shadow their number 2. It's going to be very hard for anybody to get open. Again, I cover Derek Stingley to cover almost anyone, but this adds, precious seconds to the pass rushers to get to the quarterback if you do add another guy like Derek Stingley. Who's going to get open? If they can't get open, it's going to take a heck of a lot longer than it would facing, let's say a Michael Davis, unfortunately. Over time, what this is going to cause in game day, over time, this causes hesitation, bad decisions by the quarterback. This formula works on several levels to generate more turnovers, which again, this is a stat that the Chargers, in my opinion, are aggressively trying to improve this year. The Chargers have not been a great turnover team. I think J.C. Jackson, he's got turnover written all over him. You got Khalil Mack, he's got, strip fumbles written all over him. You pair him up with Joey Bosa, who had, a career year in strip fumbles last season. I really feel like that's the kind of direction the Chargers are trying to head in right now. This also does help. I have to do, include this, guys. By bringing in a third cornerback that's shut down like Derek Stingley, this also heavily addresses our issue at depth. And that's something that I talked to you guys a moment ago, that's the one thing I'm really worried about when it comes to our corners. Michael Davis all of a sudden can become, a guy that you use a little bit more sparingly. And that's what I'm talking about, man, when it comes to premium depth. Michael Davis is serviceable. He's great to have on the roster, but especially great to have on the roster if he's your number 4 cornerback. So I like that a lot, man. I think it addresses a lot of things when it comes to depth, when it comes to, really getting the most out of your pass rush, and when it comes to, honestly, just generating more turnovers. Derek Stingley, man, I don't know if it gets much better than that, okay? So now we got to talk about go getting him. The Chargers have been very aggressive this offseason, right? It's something that we haven't really seen from this team in a very long time, if ever. And I wouldn't be shocked if the Chargers continue this trend going into the draft. A trade up in the draft to grab another shutdown corner feels like the icing on the cake, if I'm to be honest. But without a second-round pick, due to it being traded away for Khalil Mack this season, it's going to be a little bit trickier to pull this off. But it is still possible. The first thing to take into account is Sauce Gardner versus Derek Stingley, okay? There's going to be some teams out there that value Derek Stingley more than Sauce Gardner and vice versa. They're both, without a doubt, incredible players, but as of right now, I would view Sauce Gardner as a much safer pick for most teams, but especially the ones that are selecting in front of us. Because let's be honest, Derek Stingley does come with some risk. We haven't talked much about that. He's coming off a Liz Frank injury, which that's in your foot. But however, I would say that a lot of these injury concerns have been put to rest due to his performance at his Pro Bowl or his Pro Day with LSU. I think that puts a lot of those concerns to rest. But then there's his 2020 and his 2021 seasons, which he didn't show a ton of growth in. A lot of, scouts and analysts are pointing this out as like, maybe he just had this, unicorn year, this once in a lifetime year in his freshman season and then kind of disappeared. I don't think I agree with that. No one was really targeting him. I think quarterbacks and, head coaches and defensive coordinators, or offensive coordinators, they noticed how good Derek Stingley was in his freshman year, and they decided, let's just not throw his way so much. So I think that aspect might be a little bit overblown, but it is something to take into account. However, it could be enough for some people, right? For some GMs and some teams to make two things happen, right? For them to pass up on him. Two things need to happen, I think, in order for the Chargers to maybe even have a spitting distance shot at Derek Stingley. First off, Sauce needs to be drafted first, which I think is very, very likely. Sauce Gardner, very, very talented. I think he goes in the top 7, if I were to be my guess. Next, we need a QB-needy team to reach for a quarterback. I don't care if it's Willis, Pickett, whoever, whatever. There needs to be, in terms of players selected before Derek Stingley, somebody before him. And I think there are some quarterback-needy teams that could reach for a guy like Willis or Pickett. I think Carolina and Detroit have been heavily talked about pursuing a quarterback in those early picks, right? And again, this pushes Stingley into a striking position for the Chargers. And then we have to start talking about, okay, let's say he starts sliding a little bit. What do the Chargers do? Got to start looking for some trade partners. They're going to have all of this done ahead of time, by the way. I don't think Stingley makes it past Minnesota at pick number 12, and that's a team that we've been heavily linked to in the past, I would say, couple of days as potential trade partners. If Stingley makes it to 12, I think Minnesota takes him and doesn't look back. They really, really need cornerbacks, right? So I believe if Stingley falls past 9, you really need to start entertaining a trade with the New York Jets or Washington. I think the Jets could be the team to potentially take Sauce Gardner at pick number 5. Of course, they have 2 first-round picks, and I think they would be more inclined to trade down if they would like, more, compensation via the Chargers. So if you can trade with New York Jets or Washington Commanders at 10 or 11 to try and jump those Minnesota Vikings, I think you've got a shot at Derek Stingley without having to give up too much in terms of compensation, right? But it would be pricey. Even the move up from 17 to 10 or 11, that could be next year's second-round pick and change. It could be 2 third-rounders, so this year's and next year's third-round pick. But if Stingley's their guy, man, if this is the plan that Brandon Staley's trying to put in motion, we're trying to make, a move for the Super Bowl, it's going to take a defense of this caliber, I back it, right? Would I personally do this? It's really tough to say. I'm more inclined if he slips past 8, especially if they view him in that way. If he really is that final piece of the puzzle, then I'm definitely more on board. But when it comes to trading up a little bit higher, I think I would pass. It would be way too expensive, okay? But, Director, what about the possibility that Derek Stingley falls to us at pick number 17? you know what? I guess you can't rule that out. This next segment, the Derwin slide. A lot of Chargers fans point out the Derwin slide as evidence that it could happen again with Derek Stingley. And again, I cannot rule it out, right? Between Derek Stingley's foot injury and lack of growth in his 2020 and 2021 season, it could be just enough for people to pass on him. Insanely enough. A lot of people did the same thing with Derwin James. A lot of people had concerns with his injury, etc., etc. He slid down to us at, guess what? Pick number 17. But I don't know if I see that happening again. Cornerback is not I mean, it's different. Again, Derwin James and Derek Stingley play two different positions, right? Safety, especially back then, wasn't really viewed as a position that you want to take with a really high pick. Cornerback, I don't feel like is the same way. Corner is not a position that anyone has enough of, right? You could have a really good corner like we are right now, the Chargers. We got JC, we got Asante. You could be a team with really good corners and still want more corners. And that's kind of what Brandon Staley has been talking about. That's kind of what, the reason why it's going to be very difficult for him to fall, I would say, outside the top 10. Every single team in front of us would benefit tremendously from adding Derek Stingley. Again, granted, if he stays healthy. Still, I can't rule it out, though. Again, it's less likely, but it definitely could happen. If there's one thing that we see every single year, it's GMs overthinking prospects and their little red flags. And a lot of the times, some premium talent every single year falls outside of the top 10, sometimes out of the first round. Derek Stingley's going to get selected, top 15 no matter what. Could he make it to 17? Definitely possible. Definitely possible. If we sit tight at 17 and he still comes to us down there, I think we're extremely lucky. People will be looking at the Derwin James, the Derek Stingley slide as some of the most ridiculous slides of all time in NFL history, but he's not going to make it past us. We know Brandon Staley loves him, right? He took the trip out to LSU. We know that Brandon Staley's got his eye on him, so it definitely could happen. I think it's very unlikely. I think it would take a tremendous amount of luck, but I think it definitely could happen. So to answer my own question really quick before we start wrapping this video up, at the top of the video, I asked, would I trade for anyone outside of Derek Stingley? It really depends on who falls, right? If I can trade up with Minnesota, which again is the rumor right now, it'd only be for guys like Jamison Williams, Charles Cross, and yes, Derek Stingley, if he's still available and the Vikings don't take him. If he's there, I'm sure the Vikings take him. Other guys like Sauce and Icky, I think they would require a trade, into the top 7, which is definitely too sweet for my blood, all right? So to wrap this video up, bottom line for me, do I think the Chargers walk away with Derek Stingley in round 1 of the NFL draft? Well, I can't flat out say no, right? As a matter of fact, I think it's a strong maybe, right? Brandon Staley taking the trip to LSU's Pro Day is very telling, right? Sure, he probably was checking out other prospects as well, but we know like who he's really there to observe, right? Heck, he coached him through his drills, right? They had a lot of conversations, Derek Stingley and Brandon Staley. We know Staley wants more corners. He stated this in an interview, I think a couple of weeks back, maybe a couple of months back, right? We know this team is turning a corner. We know, this is a year that's different in terms of taking risks. So if I had to guess, I think Stingley is definitely in the Chargers' plans for 2022. But I also feel it's somewhat circumstantial, right? Stingley has a lot of potential to slip for various reasons outside of the top 10. And if he does, I believe the Chargers would be ready to pounce. And it does make a lot of sense. I love guys like Chris Olave, Trent McDuffie, Jordan Davis, Andrew Booth at 17. But their upside isn't quite as high, in my opinion, as Derek Stingley. Derek Stingley could turn out to be the next Jalen Ramsey. And I'm not, overblowing that. Derek Stingley could be the next Jalen Ramsey. And I think the Chargers view this as an opportunity to grab a top 10 talent, right? And I think they're putting a plan in place to make it happen if the cards fall a certain way. And if we're talking analytics, I think there's a decent, percentage chance that Stingley makes it to a spot where the Chargers feel comfortable chasing him. If Stingley does go, inside the top 10, let's say he is selected, and the Chargers don't have an opportunity to even chase him with a trade, which is also very likely, then I feel like we would be comfortable drafting a guy at 17. But as of today, I think the Chargers, in the back of their minds, in their draft room, in their offices with, Tom Telesco, are coming up with a plan to chase Derek Stingley if the circumstances do fall a certain way, which, again, it's almost 50-50 to me. It could certainly happen. He could certainly get drafted top 5 for all we know. But if he does, if there is an opportunity, I think the Chargers are getting ready to pounce. So you guys let me know in the comment section below what you think. Do you think Derek Stingley realistically makes it to 17? Would you trade up for anybody outside of Derek Stingley? And do you think there's any chance in heck that the Chargers trade, up, let's say to pick number 10 or 11 to jump the Vikings in order to get Derek Stingley if he does start the fall. Let me know in the comment section below. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. Hit us up with a like and sub on your way out if you did enjoy this content. This has been The Director. We'll see you next time, and as always, bolt up and stay frosty. Oh my God, dudes. Derek Stingley, J.C. Jackson, Asante Samuel Jr., it's ridiculous.